Hello, thanks for joining us. This is Endeavour Solutions and GP Support North. Today we're going to be talking about Dynamics GP 18.5 and what is new. And of course, we love Dynamics GP. For fun, we've uncovered that this month, being February 2023, is the 30th birthday for Dynamics GP. Great Plains, which was acquired by Microsoft and became Dynamics GP, is older than 30 years, but their Dynamics 1.0, which was their top ERP system that became Dynamics GP, Dynamics 1.0 was released February 1993. So 30 years ago, and very excited to have been supporting it for a number of years and many more to come. As mentioned, there is a roadmap to 2028 and beyond. This is the roadmap here. So Microsoft's moved from a fixed life cycle to a modern life cycle. The fixed life cycle had specific years, GP 2013, 2015, 2016, 2018. And each had mainstream support for a 5-year period, then extended support for an additional 5-year period. With the modern lifestyle, every small update, patch, fix, you name it, just keeps Dynamics GP running, and we're going from 18.2 to 18.3 to 18.4 to 18.5. This sort of changes the naming convention, but the Dynamics GP is active, being supportive, being updated, and continuing on. The current roadmap, as you can see, is 2028 and beyond, which is a similar roadmap that you're finding with many of the cloud applications that Microsoft has within Dynamics 365. So today's agenda, a little extra proclamation. We do love Dynamics GP, and we have the whole GP Support North team within Endeavour to support you. We can move you to other applications if needed, if there's a business case, if you want to. However, today's focus is stay on Dynamics GP. Here is what's new, and find what's best for you and your team. I'll touch briefly on some of the technical updates, and then we'll move it over to Marvin. He's going to talk about all the cool new things within Dynamics GP with this version, as well as with the last few versions. We'll finish off with some of the popular strategic investments that clients are looking to take Dynamics GP and surround it with the cloud, surround it with additional ISV applications without having to modify and change your core. So technical, and this is the easy stuff before moving over to Marvin. Dynamics GP 18.5, it's kind of like a new model year for cars, comes out in the fall, and some are early adopters. Majority for clients that we're working with, updates are doing it into 2023, and so quotes unofficially GP 2023 with last year's version being GP 2022. This new version has support for Windows 11, Windows Server 2022, SQL Server 2022, and it drops compatibility for SQL Server 2014. So SQL Server 2014 is now 9 years old, and the GP 18.4 still had support for SQL Server 2014. The new 18.5, which is sort of an annual update, removes that older version of the database. Multi-factor authentication is obviously something that is important in recent years, and Microsoft 365, Office 365 had some new requirements for updated security, and those were all released and updated with the latest version of Dynamics GP. A quick reminder, SQL Server and Windows Server 2019 stopped support for VBA customizations 3 years ago now. So if you are on much older versions, be aware of that. For your next upgrade, you might need to retool some VBA customizations that have been done in the past. So how to upgrade? We have 3 options. First, if you're on 18.2, 18.3, 18.4, any of the patches, hot fixes, year updates, payroll updates will automatically turn you into 18.5. There is no options really in between. Really, it's an update, not a full upgrade. And so we have this new concept called an in-place update. This can be done for certain clients, for those that are understanding of the risks and understanding of the smaller hops. Can be done with minimal testing in the live production, just throwing it in and not expecting any major changes. The traditional upgrade, which takes more time, more cost, you're talking days or weeks. For some clients, it's months, depending on their testing schedule, compared to the in-place update that can sometimes be done in a half day to a day of effort. So a lot quicker, smaller, and lower cost. The traditional upgrade is a full upgrade into the test environment, testing everything, running through sample scripts, running through reports, doing a number of other testing components. Assuming all that works, then moving into the production environment. And so you have that two-step process, a lot more hand-holding, a lot more effort, and Endeavour and your team at GP Support North can advise you on which is going to be the best fit for your organization. So that's it for the easy part. Now I'd like to transfer it over to Marvin. Marvin, I'm going to make you a presenter. Marvin's been with Dynamics GP for a long, long time. I believe it was on floppy disks back at that point. If not, just on a CD-ROM, maybe even on DOS.
It was on DOS when I started using GP. It was back in 1996, I think it was, when I started using GP. So it has been a couple of years. Seen lots of great things come through the system. Still seeing a lot of great things. So Scott, thank you very much for having me on today. I always get really excited every time we do one of these, because it's great to see that they're still putting, lots of effort into GP, enhancing it, making it better, adding functionality as we go. A couple things to note. So Scott, first of all, can you see my screen okay?
I can see your screen just fine. Do you want to take ourselves off camera?
Yeah, I might take myself off camera just to give us a little bit more space on the monitor so people can see it. So a couple little pieces of housekeeping first. One of the pieces is I've got the latest version of GP, so GP 18.5, so we've moved over to the modern life cycle. In regards to the version of GP 18.5, I also have it pretty much base. In terms of any ISVs, I've added 2 ISVs into my workstation. One of them is called Smart Fill, the other one's called Smart List Builder. As we get into it, if I have time, I'll explain those, but those are just 2 of the functions, or 2 of the ISVs that I always have. But maybe just to get going, I'm just going to start diving into the features. Now, as I've mentioned in the past, GP is it's what Microsoft refers to as a mature product. So what does mature product mean? Mature product means that it's not developing functionality that it should have. For example, it has a GL, it has the purchase order, it has receivables, payables, cash receipts, all those areas. So what they're doing is they're enhancing a lot of the functionality. Now, before I start diving into the new functionality, I just want to actually just go out quickly to the web, and I just want to click on the Dynamics Vote. So Scott can send out a link to this afterwards. A lot of the features and functionalities that are getting added into GP these days are actually functions that get voted on. So some of the highest votes get added as new functionality. And as you see some of this as we go through, such as the reprint or the cash receipt emailing function, stuff like that, these are all results of people voting for what functions they want most. So I always reference this because if there's certain things that you have sat there going, I've been using GP for 10 years, it should do this. Well, there's a chance it might already do this and you don't know, or vote on it, because those votes really get the functionality or the feature set enhanced. So let me jump into some of the areas that we've got enhancements on. I'm going to go straight into some of the core features. I'm going to start out with the general ledger and some of the bank functionality, then move into the payables, and then workflow and other areas like that. But when we first get into the bank or the general ledger function, I'm going to actually jump into creating a new GL account. So if I just click on my financial tab, so as I navigate through here, I'm just going to go into my cards. So I'm going to bring my cards into focus. So it's going to open up the page a little bit more. I'm going to jump into account. So if you are creating a new account and you need to add a category to it. So let me just create 100 and just create a new account like this. As I'm looking up category, in the past, you would have to scroll through and find the category that you wanted. I've seen a lot of clients have up to 500-600 different categories because they're using this category not only to associate what the GL account is, but using it for reporting purposes. Now, as you see here, when I did a lookup on my category, what's being added is that search by category description. So I can grab my category description here, and if I just choose taxes, for example, you're going to see it jumps me right into the tax expense, and it gives me that opportunity to do a focus search to find all those different categories by description, and I can choose that category here. Now, I mentioned a minute ago that we have this new category search, so we can search by category description, which is great. But I also just wanted to make note here that this category, when you create new GL accounts, I see a lot of people ask about, what areas can we use them on? So you can search on them, you can do groupings, you can find different things like that. But I do know that inside Management Reporter, the categories, they're not critical, but they're really important, because as we're going into Management Reporter here, I'm just going to open up a row format here. You're going to see that when I have my link to financial dimension, I'm just going to double click on this. You have those three, well, mine's a 3-segment chart of accounts. Any segments that you'd have set up, you have links to there. Plus I use that account category as well as my user defined field. So that account category I find very important, because if you're building new reports and you wanted, rather than using the GL account, but categories, so if you add new GL accounts, it automatically picks it up because it's got those categories in there. It's a great feature to have. And now that Microsoft has added that, look up for category here, very easy to find the category that you want to associate the GL account to when you're creating new GL accounts. So in along those same lines, I have my chart of accounts, I have my multiple segments. I'm going to go down into my setup here for a second. So as I go through here, I'm just going to go into my setup. Now inside my setup, I used to have to do a lookup and scroll through and find the different segment IDs. But now what I have is the ability to find by description as well. So following along that same lines, enhancing the search capabilities inside the GL, we have find by category description. We also have find by segment description. So 2 great new features that they've added in helping people search and find the different GL accounts, or having the GL account search for the groupings there. So the next feature that I want to touch on is the journal entry inquiry, but more so how it ties into workflow. So workflow has been a big thing for the last couple of versions. You can set up workflow in different areas. They keep adding additional functionality. You'll see in this version they've done the same thing. But one of the areas that they added workflow to in the past was the ability to have journal entry approvals. So you can set it up that if it hits a certain GL account or whatever the criteria is, we can actually identify whether workflow should be turned on. Now, to be able to see that workflow history, if I just go under Inquiry Summary and Journal Entry Inquiry, in the past, you could search on any of the journal entries unless it was recurring to see the workflow history. However, if it was a recurring journal entry, you wouldn't. Now, normally you would see my view history up here on my workflow history. I don't have it there. So just doing a quick change here, I'm just going to go down into my administration tab, because I also like to show how some of the setup gets done as well. I'm going to go down into my company. So I'm just going to minimize my setup here, and I'm going to go down into my workflow here and go into my workflow maintenance. So down into my workflow maintenance, when I pick up my financial here, you'll see that there's GL account approval. I love this feature. So if you want to set up accounts, so others can set them up, but there's an approval required before they can be used, that's where that is. But in regards to the general ledger batch approval or journal entry approval, I'm just going to activate this. Okay, so by turning this on, I'm just going to save that workflow. All of a sudden, that's going to change the view on my window. So when I go back into my journal entry inquiry, you'll see that view history is now there. So the view history is a feature that was added before. However, what they've done is they've enhanced it. So if it's a recurring journal entry or a reversing journal entry, it now has that as the view history. And I can see all of what happened in the background. So when was it submitted? When was it approved? When was it rejected? Things like that. So I love the workflow. It's a great feature that they've added. They just continue to enhance on it. The next thing that this feature actually, the transactional level posting through the GL. Okay, so GP has always had the ability to post a subledger entry. So if I was posting a payables batch, for example, if it was in a batch, it would flow, you would have the option in the posting setup. So let me just go under the posting setup here. So under here, if I go to Tools, Setup Posting, and Posting down here, I'm just going to pick up my purchasing as an example, but you'll find this in all the different functional areas. When I go into my payables transaction entry, one of the things that was added in an earlier version was the post through general ledger files. Why was this great? This was great because I could have it set so I create a by transaction. In the past, if it was in a batch, you could have it post through the GL, but if it wasn't in a batch, it would stop in the GL and wait for you to post it. So when they added this functionality, this was fantastic because it didn't need to be in a batch anymore. However, what they did do is you had to have the printing on the journal entry. So you'd have to go down into here under financial and turn on the printing of the journal entry for it to be able to post through. Well, they've actually removed that requirement now. So I don't have to have my financial post through print turned on. I could simply just say post through the GL files, and that gives me the ability when I hit post, it isn't going, if it's not in a batch, it is going to go straight through and post through to the GL as well. So this is one of those features that I've been waiting for like 20 years for, and they have it, and now they also have it so that you don't even have to have it print when it's sitting in the GL. So a lot of great functionality on that. And this one, I love this. This is one that I voted for as well. All righty, so that's transaction level posting through GL without printing the GL posting journal. So the next area, so along the same lines of GL and banking and everything, I'm going to actually move over to, I'm just going to click on my financial tab here and move over to the next feature, which is the reprint of the bank journals. Now, I've been using, I've said it before, I've been using GP for some time now. In regards to the bank rec function, GP, great bank rec function. One of the things that they had when they initially rolled it out was the fact that you couldn't reprint bank posting journals. So they added that a few versions ago, but to enhance that functionality, when I go under the reports over here, you're going to see what they've done is they've added the ability to reprint bank posting journals in the different areas like the bank deposit, the multi-currency bank deposit, the clear transaction, the outstanding transactions. And now to be able to reprint them, you have the ability to narrow down the focus and search by audit trail code number. So if I just go to bank posting journals here, and if I just pick, I can say my bank transaction journal. In the past, prior to the update, you could never reprint, and then an update a few versions ago, you could start reprinting them. But when you reprinted them, you would only have the option of either doing checkbook ID or posting date. I often saw people do posting date because, well, they knew that they did a bank rec around this point of time, so they picked the month, and all of a sudden, if you had 10 bank accounts, you get way too many. Now they've added the audit trail code here, and you can start choosing which audit trail code you want, and then select that one, and from there you can post. So this gives you the ability to do your bank recs inside GP, of course, but I don't always have to have the posting journal turned on because I can always reprint it. There's no issue with that. Now, the nice thing about this, I was actually on a call with a client the other day, and they were doing bank recs on a monthly basis. And they said, all right, well, I'd like to make it a little easier. So along those lines, we sort of made a couple of recommendations. One of them was to use the electronic reconcile function. So this is where you can actually go and create a configurator file. So if you download the file from the bank, you can then tie it into your bank rec function. And the moment that you go to reconcile bank, it's going to go read that file that you downloaded, mark off any transactions that it can find. It uses a little bit of a cross-reference there for maybe the check number and the amount. And then what it does is it marks off the transaction, so it quickly and easily does the bank rec. I can also, in my configurator, if I had certain features, so for example, if I pick up my BAI test file here, I can always say, there's some standard codes that are being used on a BAI file, like a 409 for a debit or a lockbox or an ACH. I can also add additional codes here and choose a default GL account. So if it was a service charge, there is actually a service charge code here. But if there was one of the codes that you're getting through on yours and it's not listed here, you can always update it. So great feature, an older feature with the download bank rec or the electronic bank rec function. But now if you start thinking about it, to go back to that example, we sort of said, hey, you know what, if you're able to download this BAI file, you could actually download it. You could reconcile weekly if you wanted to. So you don't have to wait till that month end. And then as part of that process, if you don't want to print your journal, like print those journals, those bank posting journals, I can always go back and easily find them now with this new functionality. So the next piece here, just along the same lines of the banking, is the print bank history reports. So you have the bank posting journal, but now you have a field for bank history. So now when you're setting up bank history reports, you can use the date range restriction just like in the posting journal here. But when I go down here, I have the different options here. So if it's a bank transaction history, I can easily pick this up. And now you're seeing not only the number, audit trail code, the different attributes here, but I have the transaction date. So now I can narrow it down on the bank history reports to be able to see this transaction date. So two really great features added to the bank rec functionality. And then when you combine them with some of the other stuff that's happened in the past, such as that configurator file for the electronic bank rec, really makes the bank rec function a lot easier when you're looking at core GP. So in along the lines of the checkbooks, the financial and the banking, for those that have been using GP for a little bit, you would have noticed in some of the earlier updates, so if I go into my purchasing here, and I go my inquiry transactions by vendor, one of the features that they added was this sort by feature and the ability to save this feature. So every time I'm looking here, I can save that if I'm looking on this and my Allison properties or whatever, and I don't want to look at history and I want to sort by, document date, and I want it to be in ascending order, I can easily save that. So this is that additional sort by function. So this on the payables and the receivable side was added at an earlier version. So now what they've done is they've gone into the financial and they focused on adding some of these functions and features into the financial. So when I go into inquiry here, you're seeing that when I go into my checkbook balance, for example, I do love this window. So two of the things that they added here is that sort by function. Okay, so now we have that sort by function. As well, we have this date field. Now this date field has been there for some time, but one of the things that they've done in this window is when I pick up my checkbook, so in previous times, had I picked up Uptown Trust, at the moment that I selected Uptown Trust, it would try and present everything in the window right away, which, if you've been on GP for a couple of years, takes 2-3 seconds to pull up that window. If you've been on GP for 20 years and you have 20 years worth of banking history, I've seen this window take a couple minutes just to refresh. So one of the things that they've done here is they've put a pause on the refresh and they've allowed you to start adding filters in your sort options before when you hit redisplay. So the moment you have the ability to narrow down the focus, it makes it a smaller query, quicker to pull back the information. So really great on this. In fact, I was working with a client last week that we had to go pull up because we were having an issue on bank rec, and it was like, well, have you cleared this transaction? Have you cleared that transaction? I pulled up this window. They'd been using the bank rec feature for the better part of 20 years. And as soon as I pulled it up, it was like, got to be on 18.5. So we get this feature in so we can just do the refresh, pick 1 month rather than the entire life, and then narrow it down to a month. So this is great that they've added this feature. A couple other things to note about this window, just because I have the window open. This is a great window, not only because it's showing me the balance, so I can see that as transactions are running through, the balances are being taken into account, and it's giving me that balance, my checkbook, but it's also giving me the ability to take a look in detail here. So if I'm just showing the detail screen here, you see that, on these different transactions as I'm scrolling through here, this transaction, for example, this payment cleared on this date. So if I needed, if a customer called or a supplier called and said, hey, we're waiting for this payment, you're like, well, we issued you a payment on the, May 31st of 2027. My test date is a little bit in the future, but I can also see that, you know what, this originated from this opt-to-pop link, and it also, you know what, it's been reconciled, so I could go back to the supplier and go, hey, you know what, you guys already cashed this check. So great window. Now that they've added this redisplay on this date filter here, fantastic feature, because it's now going to become all that much more usable for different organizations. Now, along the same lines, I've got that checkbook balance that I just touched on. Checkbook register, very similar. It's not showing me all the same detail that I was seeing on the checkbook balance, but in my checkbook register, you now see similar functionality. I have that redisplay before it starts pulling up the information. Once again, people that were on GP for 20 years and they had a ton of banking history, they wouldn't use this window because it would just be too long to refresh. But now what you'll be able to see is I can actually narrow down the scope of what I'm looking for. So I could do it by number or date, and then just simply hit redisplay here, pulls up the different transactions. I have the ability from here also to drill back to any of these documents to see what it was applied to. If this was on a payment, I can see what the payment was applied to. I can drill back if it was from a PO, and I can drill back on that PO number. So a lot of great features in here, but the really nice one is this window, for those that have been on GP for a long time, and I know a lot of people on this call have been, using this window, it took too long to refresh, but now that we have the ability to filter and redisplay, it's now way more functional on that basis. Alrighty, so same lines, I'm gonna actually jump over to one of probably the most requested feature enhancements. So people went online and they voted, and this is one of the things that most people actually voted for, and this is the ability to print and email cash receipts. So the scenario here is you've invoiced a customer, they came back and sent you a payment. On the cash receipt, I want to be able to invoice them or send them an email that we got their receipt so they could use that for their records. Now, if I go back into sales here, you're going to see that when I jump into my cash receipts window, so let me just open up my transactions a little bit further here. I'm going to click on my cash receipts window. So you're going to see I have the ability to click on email here. I'm going to actually do this from my navigation list. Okay, so I'm just going to be in my sales here. I'm going to go all sales transactions. I love the navigation list because one of the things that it does is it gives you that one-stop shop to find a lot of different information. So from here, I'm going to actually say add a filter here where document type is equal to, and I'm just going to go down and pick up my payments here. Right, so I'm going to go payments here. I'm going to refresh this window. So now I'm just seeing the payments, and inside this I have it for the last 90 days. If you want, for your personal preferences, you can say last 7 days, 30 days, 60 days, and so on and so forth. So from here, if I needed to, I can easily click on any of the payments, and I can hit send an email. Now, how does this work? Okay, so similar to a lot of the other functions on this on emailing inside GP, I'm going to want to do a couple things first before this is going to be enabled for me. I'm going to go down to my administration tab on the left-hand side here. And when I'm in my administration tab, you're going to see I have the ability to go down into my email settings. So I have email settings and email message setup. I'm going to set up a message first because there is no messages set up by default in the system. So I'm going to pick up a cash receipt. So I actually just created a message ID called cash receipts. So you'll see good afternoon on behalf of Endeavour Solutions. Like to, thank you for the payment, so on and so forth, and sincerely, and you can put your name or your information there. So I can save this, right? So I now have an email message set up. I want to be able to email my cash receipts though, so that record of the cash receipts. So under email settings here, I'm going to go into my sales series. So when I go into my sales series here, you'll want to enable the cash receipts down here. And then from here, you'll also say, this is the document name that I want to have. So I had it standard all cash receipts document. So this is my cash receipts message setup that I had. So this is just basically saying, I want to enable it. I want to allow it for the different customers that I have. Now, typically, if I went into customer setup here, so this is where people had been using for all the other document types. So when I went into customer setup here, I would be able to mark off all the customers. And then I could just do a drop down here, go into email settings, and then say, pick up all the documents. The one thing Microsoft hasn't added yet, so I just want to qualify this, is the fact that they haven't added the cash receipts check mark yet. So if you wanted to use the cash receipts, can't do a mass update on this basis here. But what I would be able to do is if I just go back under my sales here, I've enabled it. So now I would want to go into my customer cards. So under my customer card here. So from here, you'll see down in the email box down in the bottom right corner, I can just enable cash receipts here. So this is where I'm turning on the ability to do a cash receipt. Now, a couple things to make life a little easier. There's possibility of writing a script to mark off all these and set them to cash receipts. The other option that I like doing, because maybe you're not as familiar writing a script and doing it on the SQL Server, or maybe you're not even allowed to. You could always record a macro. So macros are fantastic little tools inside GP that allow you just basically do repeatable steps. So I would record a macro that basically moved from one customer to the next and marked off the cash receipts and choose the cash receipt box. And what that would do is give me the ability to pull in and mark off all the cash receipts for the customers. But now that we've set this up and we've added it to this customer, I can easily go back into this navigation list and I can say I want this all sales transactions. So I'm going to give it a second to refresh. In fact, you know what, while I'm touching on this, the reason it takes a little bit of time to refresh is it's because it's pulling up these business analyzer reports on the right-hand side. Now they're really nice and everything, but if you're looking at my screen right now going, how the heck do I know what that is? I can't even tell it says receivables aging by customer. Well, maybe you don't use these business analyzer reports, or maybe you have them on your home page anyway. If you want to, you can always go down here and you can go show or hide and turn off the business analyzer reports. Or if you wanted to from the home page, I can easily just go under here and tools, setup, system. And when I go into my reporting or system preferences, sorry about that, I can turn off my business analyzers. Maybe I want to keep it on my home page, but not on my navigation list. So as soon as I take it off my navigation list there, and I go back to all sales transactions, what you're going to see is it comes up a lot quicker, and I don't have that noise on the right-hand side of which I couldn't really read anyway. So I now want to go add a filter here. So to get back to where I was, add a filter where document type is equal to payment. Right? And then I'm just going to add this and refresh this. And now I've got a listing of just my payments. Now, if I wanted to, I can highlight any one of these or multiple of them and easily enough just send in an email and just hit send here. That gives me the ability to mark off if I was looking at my last 7 days, mark them all off because maybe I send out cash receipts on Mondays or something like that, and just do more or less a large email to the customers that I received cash receipts for. The other thing that you can do here that a lot of people don't realize is I'm looking at my all sales transactions and it's read only because this is one of the stock or the base ones. If I do a drop down here and go save as, I can say payments for cash receipt email demo. And if I just go okay here, what you're seeing is I have just created a brand new shortcut list and I can just grab that and it'll remember what my filters are. So another little tip or a little trick here to make things a little easier. So if you want to use this email function, I can easily go send an email, but I would probably add a custom or a customized navigation list for myself just to make it drop down the payments quicker. All righty. So I'm now going to move over. So we've talked a little bit of banking, a little bit of the cash receipt side, some of the GL side. I'm now going to move over actually onto some of the vendor stuff, okay? So one of the first features that they've added is on the vendor card. So inside the vendor card, as most of you guys know, you can have basically an unlimited number of vendors. So new vendor is a travel company. Okay, so let me just do a lookup here and grab, oh, a travel company. It looks like I got a couple duplicates there for a second. But under a travel company, you'll see I have a number of different addresses here. So you can have unlimited number of addresses. However, A lot of companies, they want to keep the history of what they've done. So they don't want to delete these addresses because they've either bought from them or remitted to them or purchased from or whatever the different, functions are for these addresses. You do have the ability to inactivate an address now. So you can still keep it, but you can inactivate it so people aren't using it again, or at least it'll give them a warning if they try to use it again. And that's simply enough by clicking on this inactive button. Now, a couple things that they've built in here is you'll see if I click on inactive, it's seeing that it's being used as on a vendor record. So in the background here, you'll see that I have it tagged as my purchase address. I'm gonna say no here because I grabbed the wrong address. I meant to grab the Montreal address. And I'm just gonna hit inactive there. Now, if I try and use this vendor and I try and create a payable to this vendor. So if I just go under transactions, purchasing transaction entry here, so whether it's a payable or a purchase order, if I try and use this vendor here, and I'm just gonna pick up Ace Travel, if I try and grab that Montreal address here, you'll see that this is inactive. Do you want to continue using? Nope. So it's giving me that warning that isn't going to let me use that address, or at least give me a warning if I try to use that address. So great little feature there. Now, one other thing that I want to touch on here. So as I'm going through, if there's little things that, sort of spark my interest, I noticed I want to touch on them. I noticed that I had vendor 123 here and Ace Travel. I've seen this at so many different organizations where, they put little stars, do not use, or now this is really this customer, or now this is this vendor. Years ago, Microsoft released something called professional service tools. And I think it was after version 18.3 or something, everybody in the GP world, they were just given these professional service tools. They used to charge for them, now they actually have given them away. What the professional service tools does is it gives you the opportunity to do a lot of different things. So whether it's on the customer side, merging or creating new customers or move them, so it'll take all their history and move over to a new customer, or it'll merge them, or in my case on the vendor side, you'll see that the professional service tools for the vendor and customer have been broken out into the utilities section here. I can use this vendor combiner and modifier feature. So not a new feature in this release, but as I'm touching on it, it's really great to note. So when I click on the source vendor here, I can easily say, yeah, you know what, 123 is really supposed to be a travel company. And because I'm doing combiner, it's going to take all the history of 123 and merge it into Ace Travel. So I'm not going to lose all that great history I have. It's just going to be pushed over into that new vendor that it's supposed to be. So easily enough, I can just click on process here. Now, as saying this, I'm going to recommend, if you're going to be doing this, a couple things to take note. Do it after a good backup. You'll want to log on as somebody with the authority or the rights to do it. Often I see people do this as SA. And you'll notice the last thing, there's no undo button. So make sure you, as I mentioned earlier, make sure you have a backup. Because if you do accidentally merge two vendors that you didn't want to, there is no undo to split them. You have to go back to your backups to restore from backup. Alrighty, so that's the inactive vendor address ID. Now, I've touched on some of the bank stuff and I've touched on some of the vendor stuff. This next feature I really love because it's a long time coming and it's finally they've added it. And that's the ability to actually push transactions from payables that are going into checkbooks either as EFT or credit cards, allow them to post in summary. So first step first, I went into my payable setup and I'm going to mark off the allow post checkbook or post to summary for EFTs or credit cards. So what this means is prior to this functionality, if I was doing an EFT run or an ACH run, what would end up happening is if I had 50 vendors that I was paying, as soon as I process that, this is going to flow through to the bank rec module. However, it's going to flow through as 50 different transactions. Wasn't difficult in the bank rec because they'd always show up in sequence because you sort by check number or payment number. So it would be EFT 1, 2, 3, 4, and you could just mark them off, begin range, end range, mark all. However, it was always a pain because you know what? I know it's going through my bank as one transaction. I just want to see one transaction sitting in my bank rec module. So now what we have the ability to do is to allow them to post in summary. So I'll turn this check mark on. And then when I go into my payables window, so if I'm doing a payables batch, so payments all have to be done in batches. So if I just go up into transactions here and I do my billed payment batch, right? So I can either go into my batches here, or I can go build payment batch. So I'm going to go MB test, whatever my batch name is. And when I pick that this is going to be a computer check batch, you'll notice here as soon as I tag the EFT, oh, let me pick up a checkbook that is enabled in EFT. That would be my first bank. And as soon as I pick that, my post payments are being done in summary or transactions. So my default is set to summary because I set it there. And it would also work on that credit card function as well. So this is great. I now have the ability for it to flow through to the bank rec in summary. So I'm seeing one large payment instead of 50 separate payments. The other thing, just to sort of tie back into that bank rec that we were looking at, or the bank checkbook balance or register, when I'm going into this window now, what ends up happening is if I go back into my first bank, if I see a transaction, so let's say this was a large payment run here, when I drilled back on it, well, this happens to only be one payment, but if it was a batch that was posted in summary, it would actually open up another window that would show me a listing of the 50 checks or whatever it was, and I could pick on any one of them and drill back into the details. So I would have the ability to not only post in summary, I could see the summary line in here, so it's going to flow through to the bank rec in summary, and then I would also have the ability from this to see the details and drill into any of the details, and if I needed to, I could always recreate the check stub or see how it was applied or whatever information from there. So this long time coming, love this feature. The fact that we can now post checkbooks for EFTs or credit cards in summary. And then to enhance that, as we go through this, the summary bank display. So as you saw, I can go into my checkbook register here and I can pick up that summary amount when I'm looking at my checkbook register. So easy, those are two great features, or one great feature with two functions because it's flowing through to the bank rec and it's flowing through to that inquiry window as well. So awesome that they've got that added in. Now the next feature in lines with the vendor side, so on the payable side here, I'm just going to move down into my purchasing tab, is dealing with the 1099s. So 1099, so if you're in the US, a 1099 deals with subcontractors and payments made to subcontractors through the payables module. Inside the vendor card here, you're able to identify if the supplier or the vendor is a 1099 vendor, and you can also identify, what type, so non-employee compensation, and what is the code that they should be tied to. So 1099's been around for a long time. However, one of the things that you had to do, or one of the things that the system wouldn't do, is when you printed the 1099s, it would never print the NEC form with the line. So it never looked formatted right. So you'd either have to build a custom form or modify the existing form to build that out. But now what they've done is they've actually updated the form layout for the 1099s. So you can see here, if I just pick up a non-compensation, I have one side form, one wide with box. And when I click on print forms here, that's going to print the layout of the form. Couple things to note in the layout of this window. You have two print windows, print and print forms. Print form is actually going to print the form layout that I was just talking about. So now you actually have the 1099 form that typically you would have had to modify in the past for you to be able to print one of these in this format, an NEC format for a supplier. So great feature, nice little addition there. On a side note, so 1099s used in the US. In Canada, we do have a number of clients that use the 1099 for vendors or suppliers that use T4As. So what they do is they tag a vendor as a T4A and they use it for similar functionality. Of course, this isn't going to print your T4A, but it's extremely easy at the end of the year or whatever, if you wanted to print, the 1099 listing at a smart list, or even from here, you could print the 1099 listing so you can see what each person got paid and so on and so forth. So I only have one for a supplier here, but you could easily grab that information. So not necessarily the NEC form, which is the update that they've done, but 1099s, if you do have T4As that you're trying to track, and at the end of the year, you're like, oh my gosh, I got to pull all these things together, and it's a bit of a pain, I recommend just tagging the supplier or the vendor as a 1099, make your life a lot easier afterwards. So in lines with purchasing and on the sales side, GPs had the ability to email documents. So whether it was a purchase order or a sales order, sales invoice, for quite a long time now. Now, one of the releases with this version, so 18.3, 18.4, and 18.5, took into account that multi-factor or MFA. You know, there was error messages people were getting prior to 18.3, where once Microsoft deprecated TLS 1.0 and 1.1, people started getting errors along those lines. Well, when you move up to 18.5, those errors are all gone, or actually, I think it was 18.3 or 18.4 where they fixed it, so 18.5 is all good. However, one of the things that I'll say has always been kind of missing on the GP side is when I go to print either a purchase order or a sales order, I want to have a copy internal and I also want to email. So in the past, if I went into my purchase order here and I pulled up a purchase order, for me to print, I could print this. However, if I wanted to email, it's a separate button. So now what they've done is they've actually baked the print and email all into the same email button. Now, as I click here, oh, got a little bit of a message. You can't print an unauthorized purchase order. Okay, so that's a little different than the print job here. So let me just close this for a second. So inside GP, one of the previous releases is I have the ability to create commitments. So under my purchase order enhancements, so under my setup purchase order enhancements, I do have the ability to say I want to set up commitments. So it's making me check to make sure I have budget and everything in place, and I can activate approvals there, or I can use workflows. But because my purchase order enhancements are in place here, you'll see I have a number of POs that have not been approved yet because they're over $1 threshold. I'm just going to authorize this one and get back to the function. So I'm just going to commit that. So now I've committed to my budget a certain number of dollars. I don't need to print that off. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back up into my purchase order here. So now for the enhancement that they've done. So I'm going to go up here. I'll grab that purchase order 2204. It is now approved. That's because the purchase order commitments was on. But when I click on my email here, you'll see now I have the ability to email, and I also have the ability to print a copy all in one window. So I don't have to close it, open it, close it, open it, and do 2 separate steps. It can all be done in a single step now. So that's fantastic. Now I can also do this from this window, or I could have done it from the navigation list. So if I wanted to go all purchase order transactions, I could also have ones that haven't been printed yet, so I may want to create a list for just those ones in particular. But in this case, I can go all my purchase order transactions, I can mark them off, and from here send email, and I would be able to print and send them all from here as well. So nice little quick print option. Yeah, I just love that feature also. So I'm going to move over. So you heard me mention purchase order commitments. So that's a little bit of one of the older functions inside GP, and that's under the purchase order enhancements. But one of the areas that Microsoft has been adding a ton of functionality around and enhancing is the workflows. Okay, so the new feature that they've added is the ability to have the option not to track history on workflows that don't need an approval. So what does that mean? That means maybe I've created a workflow here. So I'm just going to go under my administration tab here. When I go under my administration tab, under my company setup, so I'm just going to move down into company and into my workflow here. I'm going to jump into my maintenance. So maybe I have a purchase order approval here. Now under my purchase order approval, maybe I have a check value. So anything over $1,000. So that doesn't necessarily come out to the right one, but let me just change this and go under my condition here where amount. And let me just go down into the amount field. Okay, I'll just grab subtotal to make it easy, is greater than and includes $1,000, right? So I'm just going to add that, and I'm going to remove that one there. So this is really an over $1,000 approval. So on this, under this check value, so I'm just going to go back and save this. I have the ability to omit when no actions needed on the workflow. So if this was a $500 purchase order, I don't need to track the history on it. So it's not going to fill up the history with things that didn't require approvals from the workflow. So that's where one of the functions have been added. So now when I go in and I generate the PO and it's under $1,000, it's not going to keep tracking it in history because there was no approval required. So it just now gives me that focus as I look at different workflows and see the history on it. It's only going to show me those ones that required an approval as well when it was created, who it was sent to, who approved it, and so on and so forth. So that is the workflow history for no approval. So that's turning off that workflow history. So that is on the workflow side. Now, there's a couple other things that have been added as well to extend the functionality. I've touched on this navigation list, and this is probably one of the areas that people don't use nearly as much as they should use. So I'm going to touch on this and go add sales transactions. So inside the add sale or all sales transactions here, you see that I have a couple different customized or tailored navigation lists. Easily enough if you wanted to, and this is either in financial, sales, purchasing, inventory, all the different navigation lists. If you wanted to, you could say, I want to add a filter where it is, a date is a certain date range, or I want to see, anything that has additional information. So you can tailor it down to yours and save it as, maybe a Marvin's custom list. So I can just go here, Marvin's custom sales list. So maybe it's a date range that you want. Maybe you want to start modifying the look and feel of what this window is. I can easily click on this. So now I have the Marvin's custom, and for anyone that knows me, it's not a surprise, I just spelled that wrong. So Marvin's Customo sales list here, and I can start to customize the look and feel of just this list. Now, some of the features that were added is the ability to add a lot more columns. So you can add additional columns around the batches and the batch source and things like that. So if I click on customize here, a lot of people don't realize that you can actually go customize this list view. So I can say for this one, I do want to show my business analyzer because I just turned it off a little while ago. Or on the columns here, I want to go through this and say, yeah, you know what? I want the customer ID, status, currency, all these additional fields here, some workflow status, some ship complete, everything like that. So I can just easily add that. My action pane, which is along the top toolbar here. If I wanted to start modifying my action pane, I can start modifying the different fields that I want to look at when I'm going up along the top of the action pane. When I go down here in my sharing, I can say that this is shared with just me or anybody. So I have that ability, kind of like a smart list, but now my navigation list has some of these additional features. And the enhancement was adding the additional columns here, as well as the report settings here. You can actually specify which reports your action pane is going to have a listing on when you go up to the reports there. So easily enough, I can click on OK here. I can hit save. So now that I've saved my changes, you're going to see any changes along my action pane would have been updated. Any filters that I'd put on are going to be saved along those lines. As well, I have all these additional columns now. So the function or the feature that was rolled out is adding additional columns to search for it. But the reality is, whenever I've talked to different organizations, nobody is using these navigation lists nearly as much as they can. So hopefully you're seeing the value in these, because if I needed to start searching on these, easily enough, if I wanted to, I could say, show me everything for Aaron Fitz. So I'm just going to go Fitz here and do a search, and that's narrowed down anything that contains the word Fitz here. Now, if I had to, and I want to take a look at this invoice, I can go to my all-in-one view. So my all-in-one view is going to tell me about this one document. So this order, this invoice here actually started out its life as an order. I can drill down and find all the different related or the all-in-one items that are attached to it. So if there was a payment, I would see the cash receipt associated to it. If it started out as a quote, I'd also see all the quotes and everything that were linked to it as well. So nice and easy, I can get all that information. I can mark off singles or multiples. So if I needed to, if I wanted to add a, find just the payments, I can search on that as well. So great feature, the navigation list, which has been around for a while, but the enhancement of giving you additional columns and searchable function like that, fantastic. So another feature that was added, and it's actually going to be tying into a couple different things, is the report scheduler. So the report scheduler itself, it's been around for quite some time. So I'm just going to go back up to my home here, and I'm going to go under my administration, my routines. I'm just going to open this up so everyone can see it. And you'll see under the company listing here, report schedule. So report schedule, this has been around for quite a number of versions of GP, and it gives you the ability to basically schedule reports. Okay, initially it was set up to just schedule reports, and you would have the ability to say, I want to run these reports on the first of the month, and it would be tied into, when somebody logged in, it would run it when it was the first day of the month. The feature that they've added is giving you the start date and start time. So now you can actually schedule these to happen off hours. So I don't have to be logged in. what it's going to do is it's going to give the ability to generate if I was doing a financial report, or if I was doing a trial balance or something along those lines, I could easily just select which ones I want. I would specify a print location, so it's going to print it to a specific location. So that report, when it hits that time, is going to actually allow you to schedule it. One of the other areas that people don't realize this is the fact that you can actually schedule your checked links as well. So if you had file maintenance that needed to be done, and maybe you've been using GP, as I mentioned, for 10, 15 years, and it's going to take more than a minute or two to run your file maintenance, and people can't be in the system when you're running it, or they can't be into that functional area, you may want to offload this to an off time. Well, this ability to publish it at a given start date and time, and you can say it every week or every weekdays, or you can say that I want to do it on whatever, on weekends or whatever, you can specify that, and you can tie it to do whether it's just reports or even down to file maintenance with check links. So nice and easy, you can just mark these off and publish, and what that's going to do is when that time hits, so the new feature is adding that date and time around here, and the fact that you can see that, well, on the 21st, at 10:30 p.m. is when this is going to run next, is when I publish it. So that's adding the time option to the report scheduler. But once again, just like the navigation list, a lot of people don't use this. And I've had a lot of people ask, but oh, file maintenance, I guess we should do that, every month, every 6 months, every whatever it is. Yep, but you know what? Might as well just schedule it and let the system do it on its own, and then print out the report so you can see what was done afterwards. So nice and easy on that. Now, the report scheduler is great, and the fact that there is a scheduler in the background of GP is also fantastic because it ties into this next function that I wanted to touch on, and that is the automatically posting workflow batches when they've been approved. So I'm just going to go back here, and I'm going to go under my company setup, so under setup company. And when I scroll down here, I'm just gonna jump back into workflow here. And under my workflow maintenance, maybe some of you guys noticed that, but when I have a workflow here, you can see automatically post when workflow is complete. So what that means is in the past, you would be able to automatically post. So when the workflow was generated, the first version of the workflow, somebody would have to post it separately. The second generation of the workflow is it could be posted automatically, but somebody had to approve it inside GP. This version now says it's going to be enabled if somebody approves it through their email. So as you know, I can set up an email function here that it says if this person has, it got sent out to Scott for approval. If Scott opens up his email and approves it from his email, what now will happen is if this automatically posts when workflow is complete is turned on, it is going to fire a scheduled task. So let me just go back under administration here, and under my scheduled tasks here, you will notice that if I scroll down, there is a workflow task. Where is the workflow task for the, well, you might have to trust me here when I say workflow task, purchasing. Where's the workflow task? I saw it just a little while ago before this. There is an actual workflow task inside the scheduler. So if somebody approves it through their email, it is going to actually tag that workflow task, and it is going to automatically post that batch. So it has now the ability to auto post the batch when it is being approved through an email. Oh, there we go. Well, no, that's workflow history report. Sorry, but workflow posting. There we are. So this actually will get tagged off automatically if you've checked it in the background. And now what it'll do is it'll enable it to be posted automatically when it's being approved. So you no longer have that, I'm going to submit it to Scott for approval. It sends me a notification back. I got to go back into GP and post it. Well, that was fixed last version, where if Scott went into GP to approve it, it would automatically post it. But now the enhancement is Scott can approve it through his email, and because this workflow posting is being marked off, it is now going to auto post if that check mark's on. So I don't have to, Marvin, who submitted it to him in the first place, doesn't have to go back into the system and approve it. So
Marvin.
the last enhancement, oh, Scott, I'm right on time because this is the last enhancement that I want to talk about, and that's multi-factor authentication is being turned on for the web client now. So I think I might have gone over with my time, Scott, which is what you were pulling out the big hook to say.
Actually, the question was, there's a great, there's a few questions that come in through the chat. One of which
Yeah.
is the screen that we see here of Report Scheduler. Does it work with SmartList reports?
Uh, no, it doesn't. It is actually the reports that are built inside a GP. So not on the smart list reports.
Okay. So if you wanted to
Because
schedule
the
a
smart,
report, Endeavour could create a custom report for you that then could be scheduled?
yeah, that would probably be one of the easier ways of doing it. The smart list reports, the idea behind those are they're actually, it's more of an ad hoc report that you can save and rerun as you want. Something that might be, I know it's not the question, but something that might be of use is if we were in SmartList, for example, here, you may want to turn around and say two things. Now, this wouldn't be scheduling the report, but it would actually be building out a SmartList export solution, because I typically see people, they run this, but this isn't actually a report, it's just a data list. And when you run this, people often send it out to Excel, for example. So if the function of I send it out to Excel because it goes into a pivot table and does a bunch of other stuff, you could actually take, and whatever the other stuff is, you can record. I mentioned a macro before. In Excel, you can record a macro, save the macro. So what you would be able to do is from here, let me just open one up because I have a sales transaction. It's called Marvin's Demo. If I go into my, if I wanted to, I could always export this out to Excel. Great, fantastic, jumps out to Excel. And if I needed to, and every time I went to this and went insert pivot table and then grabbed a pivot table, and I know I'm getting sidetracked here, but I love to get sidetracked. For anybody that knows me, I'll go here and I'll go date and I'll go amount and drag this, and that's, you know, my sales by year or whatever. If I always do this, record these steps that you did in Excel as a macro. I'm going to close this Excel spreadsheet, so you'll see no Excel spreadsheets here. Attach that macro under export solutions. You'll see I called it sample here. So this sample is actually attached to sales transactions, and it's attached to this Marvin demo. So when I'm up here and I go sample, I should have called it, you know, demo export to Excel or something. But when I go sample here, what it's going to do is it's going to take this, dump it out, run that macro. So play that macro, and my pivot table is created automatically. So unfortunately, the scheduler, not for smart list. However, an export solution might be really nice on the smart list side if this is what you're trying to get to, where it's done all of these routines. So that's tying in a macro to an export solution.
That's awesome. Thank you, Marvin.
No problem.
Why don't I move over to some of my components, and then do you have a few more minutes, Marvin, to answer some question and answers?
I do.
Okay. I'm going to take back presenter just to finish off. We will be recording this, people, so if you need to drop off, please do so. And if you obviously, as always, are thrilled and amazed with the insights, then we'll have a recording that you can share with others on your team. We have, talking about insights, we have a great white paper that's on our homepage. Top six tips for digital transformation while staying on Dynamics GP. And, you know, the hint, hint, nudge, nudge is there are popular investments that clients are making across our client base. We have well over 500 clients on Dynamics GP, and they're looking to complement GP with some additional automations, either using built-in functions within GP or extending and moving, connecting them to some of the cloud applications. FP&A and budgeting automation is a big one. Dashboards and cloud reporting, both Power BI, Power Apps, Power Platform, all the Microsoft cloud tools can have integrations to Dynamics GP. There's a lot of AP, AR, PO, expense management type workflow automation, as well as taking advantage of OCR, that's optical character recognition, scanning in invoices, having them pre-populated, moving through a number of the decision and repeated processes, and having those ingested into Dynamics GP. And then self-serve portals. People with work from home, hybrid working, extending access out to suppliers, to customers. There's a whole trend of self-service that's been growing over the last 10 years, 20 years. and even more so with the greater access to cloud applications, where it's just that much easier and cost effective to extend out to a broader user community. So again, you don't need to change platforms to be able to access all this digital transformation. A lot can be accomplished with GP. So to find that, www.gpsupportnorth.com, just click on it, not hiding behind a form, download it, send it to friends. We just want you to read it and enjoy it and continue to be part of the GP community. So those that are new to Endeavour, we've been around for over 34 years now. Advisory services, implementations and upgrades, and ongoing optimization and support. We do support Dynamics Nav and Business Central, as well as the Dynamics 365 CRM and Power Platforms in all the cloud applications from Microsoft, in addition to Dynamics GP, and can help you get more out of your systems. Reach out to Trish, James, or Steve on our team, as well as others within Endeavour, and visit us online. Support pages, GP pages, and you name it, have additional insights to share with you. The events page where you registered for today's webinar will have a link to the recording on that page, as well as using the search on any one of our websites. If you type in Dynamics GP, you'll be able to find our GP webpage, and again, we'll put a recording of today's presentation on that. So with that said, Marvin, I'm going to ask a few questions that have come up with the question and answers, and we'll see if some of them can come into our recording. And I may have to push you back to presenter. You let me know if it's important. So, great meeting. Thanks so much. Thank you. Can we get a copy? Can we copy? There's quite a few on that. The AR cash receipt. We talked about that as being a new function. Yep. Can it be scheduled to be sent automatically, or does it have to be one by one? So when an AR is posted.
So the answer is doesn't need to be sent one by one. So if you want to send me back the
okay, I'm making you presenter.
Alrighty. And show screen 2. There we go.
I see it.
So on here, so you'll see here payments for cash receipt email demo. So I'm going to grab that one that I used before. I can, if I wanted to say the last 7 days or something, I can click at the top check mark here. So if I click the top check mark, it's going to mark off everything that was tagged as a cash receipt or a payment. And I can send them all out at once. Okay, so I'd want to make sure that the customer was set up to receive them on the customer setup. So I could schedule all these to be sent out at one, or sorry, let me qualify that because I just used the word schedule. I can mark all these and send them in an email all at once. So I don't have to do them one at a time. So I could do them one at a time, or I could say just do Aaron Fitz or whatever and pick that down as a filter. So I could grab all of them one at a time. Now, in regards to the scheduling, I'll have to double check on that, Scott, and I will get an answer for you because it's a brand new feature and I'm not sure if it was added into the report scheduler. So I will definitely get an answer on whether we can schedule the cash receipts to go out.
Okay, will do. Another question. With the posting setup and you post through the GL ledger files, does that work with analytical accounting?
I will confirm for sure, but I believe the answer is yes. And the reason I believe the answer is yes, because analytical accounting, when it was brought in a number of years ago, it actually had features and functions that just regular GP didn't have. So for example, if I go into my tool setup, company setup here, under my options here, there was a feature to automatically post cash receipt deposits. So that was only turned on if you were using analytical accounting. I believe this was in GP 2013 or 2015, but then it got added into like 2018. So there were functions that automated a little bit more when you were using analytical accounting. Now, in regards to the post through, I will have to double check that. I have AA on my machine, so I'm just gonna, after this presentation, I'm just gonna do a quick test just to make sure that it does post through. I didn't see any exceptions there, and typically on the new feature list, it identifies what exceptions, it doesn't do it here or it doesn't do it there. Kind of like when we talked about the, marking off all the cash receipts on the customer cards. But I didn't see anything marked off for analytical accounting saying that it wouldn't, but I will test it to confirm.
Okay, thank you. The person that posted that has some additional questions. I'm going to take those offline, just around version of GP, because it's one of the older non-supported versions from Microsoft, but obviously supported by Endeavour and all of our team. And we'll figure out which components are going to be applicable to your specific implementation. Bank reconciliation, we talked about that earlier today. Can all the reports be printed and combined, or are they one per bank rec? Does that make sense?
I think what you mean is when I'm doing a bank rec here, so if I just go up to financial here, and when you're doing a bank rec, so if I go into non-inquiry, let me minimize that and go into transactions, and I'll open up transactions here. And when you're going into reconcile bank statement here, so if I pick up my, first bank and go transactions, yeah. So when I go through here and I hit the print button up here, I think they mean, can all of these be printed at once? If that's the case, if I'm reprinting, so from the bank rec, of course, that's something that can always have been done. However, I think I just reconciled that. Oh well. However, when I'm going into the reports here, because they're posting journals and I'm reprinting a posting journal, I would either have to pick, basically I'm going to have to go down and pick each one of them, but I can use that audit trail code now because it's going to be a common audit trail code between them, and pick it from there or pick it from the date. So if I go reconciliation journal here, I would have the ability to say from audit trail code. Now mine's not the best. You can see I have a second one that just happens to be today because I just actually hit it. But from here, I would have to still do them one at a time. But I do have the ability to narrow down the scope and be a lot more specific. So one of the problems that I knew in the past, or one of the issues that the enhancements addressed, is that if I just picked it by date and I did 5 bank recs on one day, all of a sudden now I've got 5 bank recs printing out and I got to go find which one I want. Audit trail code is going to be specific to an exact bank rec.
Okay.
But because it's a posting journal, they're going to still be, because it's 4 different posting journals, it would still be 4 actions to print them.
Okay. I guess a last question, and I think we'll stop there, is custom printing documents, and where do you go to create the Word doc based templates? Is that something that's user defined, or is that a support request?
Well, so the Word template, so let's just touch on the Word template for a second. So under reports here, you're going to see that there's template maintenance and template configuration. If I go to template configuration, you're going to see that I have my different companies, right? So if I pick up Fabricam, that's the test company I'm in right now, and I go under sales here, you'll see I have a whole bunch of different ones, including this use the cash receipt one as an example. So under this cash receipt one, I can say I want to be able to use this as a Word template. So no longer is it going to be trying to do a report writer document, it's going to be doing a Word template when these are marked off. The second piece is when I go under report, so you're going to want to turn off so a Word template would be used. The second piece is when I go into template maintenance here, I'm going to go down under here, and if you see, I have the original cash receipt. If I needed to, I can go on new and build it off of the original and just do a RM cash template version demo. So I'll just say that this is the version demo, and I can create this one either from a blank, or I can go from an existing one. So I can say from the base one and go to version demo here. So what that's done is it said I've taken that stock report and I've created a modified version that looks just like the stock report, and then I can simply hit modify here. Now you're going to want to make sure the Word add-in is installed. So to install the Word add-in, it's going to be on the GP media is just go into the media and just go add remove programs, and you can add the Word template or the Word function from there. And then it will add, or you may have to, depending on how your Word setup is, it may add a developer tab, or under here, and then under options, you'll just want to make sure that the Word, the developer tab's added on. You'll get the field list here, and then this is going to be the fields that are available to be dragged and dropped onto the different areas of it. So if it was in the body and I want to drag on the customer name or whatever it was, boom, just drag and drop these on. Once you finish this, you're going to go File, Save As. And if this is the version demo, I can either just save it as the version demo, or if you're like, well, the version demo was for customer A, but I've created a new one because it's got a official tax receipt or something. So if you're a not-profit, you may want to make it official tax receipt. So if I go the fish, oh, once again, my spelling is going to be a killer on this one. Official tax receipt. Oh, that's not bad for only a couple corrections.
Good job.
So wherever I saved that, when I go back into GP, so let me just go File, Save As, because I don't actually know where I saved that. So let me just go here under my C drive and put it into GP Share and put it into my Word templates. So I'll save it there so I know where it is. And then you can say, all right, this is the one that wasn't modified, but it was just simply a copy. So I can either go like this and go Add. There's that new one I have. So this is the one that I just modified to add the headers and stuff. I didn't actually drag any fields on, but you had to pretend for time that I dragged some fields on, put a nice logo on top, put the official tax receipt, stuff like that. Maybe I use that audit trail code number as the receipt number, or whatever the number that it was created with, like that, well, I call it the audit trail code number, but it'd be the cash receipt number that it was created with. And then go here and go Assign to Company. So I can say that I want to use it for this company because maybe I added the Fabricam logo on it. And I'm just going to set this as my default version. So I'll apply that and save that change. So now if you look at this, it is the default on this company. Now I could also go down and say assign it to a customer. So if I had certain reports that were specific to customers, or if I've created ones that are specific to companies, I can actually go through and assign it to multiple companies or a single company because there's a different logo. So on a very abbreviated version on how to build a Word template, that would be what you want to do. First, you want to turn on the Word template, and that's going to be under Report Template Configuration. And then you're going to, I'm going to guess, probably modify it to make it look more, I'll say, branded to your organization. That's going to be under Template Maintenance. I typically make a copy of the existing template and then call it version 1, version 2, or give it a name that makes sense to it, and then assign it to the company and set it as the default. So now when I'm printing it, so if I went back up into sales and all transactions, it would use that one as the default when I printed it.
Fantastic. Thank you, Marvin.
No problems.
As always, great insights. Just looking at the time, we're gonna wrap it up. Thank everyone for sticking around. Thank you for your continued love and support of Dynamics GP. Thank you for being a client of ours, and we look forward to helping you well into the future. Make your business applications work for you. Thanks, Marvin. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks, everyone, for showing up.